Yu-Gi-Oh! And Power Creep. It's kind of like peanut butter and jelly. They go great together. So welcome back to Team APS Plus. You guys will have to excuse me in advance if I sound a little bit slower or more tired than usual. I'm coming off of an unexpected car accident, and it's been a very long week. I'm mostly okay, but that's why I might sound this way. Anyway, though, that's not going to prevent me from complaining about Yu-Gi-Oh! Because that's what you tune in for here, isn't it? Well, today we're going to be talking about the concept of the turn zero, as the phrase has been coined by the Yu-Gi-Oh community, and why it's definitely a problem. So, what do I mean by like turn zero, or what do people mean when they say turn zero? It's basically the idea that your opponent is getting to play on your turn, oftentimes your first turn, though it could technically mean any turn of the game. Now, this might not sound like too unfamiliar, right? Yu-Gi-Oh has had in the past plenty of cards that can interact on your opponent's turn. There's like negations, there's other types of quick effects, trap cards, of course, hand traps. But there's a little bit something different with the turn zero concept. So that's what we're going to dig into. So let's get this presentation ready. We're going to start with these. So these are hand traps. They're very familiar. This is a Master Duel based post, but obviously this kind of applies to the TCG. All these cards are legal except for this one. Anyway, yeah, this is where, your Effect Veilers, your Ash Blossoms, even like an Infinite Impermanence, Ghost Ogre, Ghost Spell, whatever, you activate these cards and they just sort of negate something, and then the game state just returns to normal, right? So I summon, any search card really, and you want to use Ash Blossom or Veiler or something on it, stops it, and then my turn just kind of proceeds, and I have to go on with that. Even the stronger ones, like, Dimension Shifter or Lancia or Droll, that can kind of like, affect the whole turn, still just activate and they're done. And also, hand traps usually don't have anything to do with the engine of the deck that you're playing. I can play hand traps in my, anything deck, my Witchcrafter deck, my Rika deck, my Madolche deck. Maybe not Madolche's, But so basically they're one and done cards, and that's kind of how they work. Um, Things change a little bit though when you get into cards like Tearlaman's Havness. Now I know I've talked about this card, so I'm going to try to keep it short, but you guys know how this thing works. Your opponent uses a monster effect, and she's able to activate, summon herself from the hand, send the top three cards of the deck to the graveyard. And then, like all tier cards, if she's sent to the grave by a card effect, they can do a fusion summon with cards from your hand and field and graveyard. And this is a lot, right? All the tiers have that sort of fusing effect, and all of these like new Shizu cards have, well, they don't all, they have pairs of effects. But for instance, Agito, like if it gets sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, then it sends the top five cards of both players' decks to the graveyard. So what happens then if you use Tearlaman's Havness, right? Your opponent uses something, you chain Havness, she summons, she sends three cards. Then she happens to send an Agito, right? And so now Agito is going to trigger and send the five more cards from your deck to the grave. Now, let's assume before this even is happening that the Havness sent Agito and, two other Tearlaments cards, right? A Tearlaments monster and one of their spells or traps that do things when they're sent to the grave. So now you have a chain activating where there's going to be like one or two of those effects and Agito sending five more cards. So you resolve all of this where Agito sends more cards and they do a fusion summon and all of that. And then when Agito sends five more cards, let's say it sends more, tier cards, or it sends other, Ishizu cards, and they have their effects. And this is all happening in your opponent's turn during their main phase, or in some cases even their standby phase. And the game state isn't open. And what do I mean by like an open or a closed game state? So this is an official actual render that Konami made about the whole idea of like, open and closed game states. Let's zoom in on it. So basically the game state's open where the turn player can perform any appropriate action. So each phase and step begins here. And the thing, you can like read about it. You guys already kind of know how open and closed game states probably work. But the idea here is that once these cards start going off, your opponent still can't like just get to normal summon a card yet. They have to wait for you to resolve all of these chains and all of these links. And that's assuming that, your deck, like let's say that, you're the opponent of this tier, Shizu player, maybe the Agito also mills five cards from your deck, and you happen to have a card that like, triggers when it's sent to the graveyard, it like searches and stuff. So you get these very long chains, all this stuff is happening while the game state's still closed and you can't technically do a lot about it. So it's sort of taking the whole idea of like chain blocking and stuff and like really ramping it up to 11 where so many effects are happening and you really are powerless to respond to many of them. Um, so then we move on to the Bestial component. Now I picked Bestial Magnum because it actually does two different things kind of in a sequence. So first of all, as all of the Bestials go, or the ones that people play at least, you can target a light or dark monster in either grave and banish it and then like summon this card. So the card isn't banished as a cost, this just activates in the hand and it's going to be targeting something in the graveyard. And that means that, combined with cards like Havness and Agito, milling from their deck and oftentimes both players' decks, there's going to usually be a light or dark monster there. And then you can use this if your opponent has a monster. And then when this thing gets summoned, it activates its second effect, which will search a card during the end phase. But the effect activates when it's summoned. And so that means that in addition to everything that's going on with these cards, this gets summoned. It now has another effect when it's summoned. So like the next chain is going to... You get where I'm going with this? So many cards are activating. And like, again, this will all be... like the game state won't be open during this time. So your opponent, they can like use things in response to all of this, sure, but like they can't actually play their own turn. And I think this gets really frustrating for people because, Yu-Gi-Oh! Already has had problems with like hand traps. That was kind of controversial at first. Now it's pretty normal standard fare. People don't really like, the whole idea of like omni negating monsters. But even in those cases, and I feel crazy defending the idea of omni negates because I really don't like those either. But even in those cases, you knew what the threat was, it happens, and then like it's done. It negates your card, but then it's done. But with a lot of these cards, it's like, they activate one thing, then another thing has to happen in a chain after them. And I'm not going to leave Floowandereeze out of this because they also are, sort of culprits here. The Floowandereeze deck, I know it's not popular, and it's a deck that I play, and I like it all right, but I get why people don't like it. It plays in the opponent's turn too. Now, these effects would not have you necessarily think that, but then you get into cards like Floowandereeze the Magnificent Map, and of course the trap card Dreaming Town, where when your opponent does something, in the case of Map, if your opponent normal summons, then you get to normal summon a Floowandereeze card. And when you've normal summoned that, you might get, say, Eaglin, and then the whole Floowandereeze chain of effects begins where they're chain blocking you and they're doing searches, and then like when that's resolved, they're getting to do another summon or a tribute summon, and then those are going to do more things. And it's all just happening. And at that point, it just sort of feels like you can just pick your cards up and just sit back and like let your opponent play and let them do their whole engine like of searches and sending and like summoning and all that stuff. And it's really pretty intense, and I think it's very disruptive. Now, here's the thing. We've had card effects in the past that like entire archetypes that are kind of based on the whole idea of playing in the opponent's turn, right? So for instance, there's Melfi, and like when your opponent summons a monster or targets this thing for an attack, you can return it to the hand and then like get a certain thing, and also in the end phase you get to summon this from your hand. That's only in your end phase, of course. So Melfis aren't like nearly as obnoxious, although they can like sort of still do this. The power level is lower. They have to summon themselves during your end phase, which means like if your opponent's going first, then Melfis still aren't going to be like doing anything until your turn. And this just feels more balanced. I think like this is kind of the way to do it. Meanwhile, these cards just get wild. You've seen the live streams where like 10, 15, 20 cards get milled. Effects are happening, chains are going up to chain link 10, and like we're not even like really into the main phase that much yet. So yeah, I don't really think that this is good. I think that this really is another one of those things that makes modern Yu-Gi-Oh feel even less approachable than it already is. And it's the reason, like, again, it's the reason why I think that the like Ishizu tier deck needs to get hit. It's not because it's too strong. It is strong, but it's more like the fact that, it makes Yu-Gi-Oh into this thing that is truly, I don't want to say uninteractive, but can make your opponent feel like their turn isn't even their turn. And, there's like a meme of whole, like, oh, it's my main phase. Oh, no, our main phase, right? It's a funny meme, but like there's some truth to the fact that it really can feel like a lot of decks turn the game into just this. It's very volatile. I don't know what the word would be for it. So yeah. What do you guys think about this? Do you feel like these cards that are activating in your opponent's turn and like getting entire engines moving, getting searches happening and stuff like that are, good for the game? I think that they certainly add a little bit more fun maybe to the person using them, and so that feels nice. But I really don't think that overall they make things more inviting. And another small side effect of it too, that I forgot to mention, I'll just mention real quick, is the fact that, because this is happening in your opponent's main phase and then your turn is going to happen like right after that, it can actually be really easy to lose track of certain hard ones per turns because it might feel like one of these hard ones per turns happened in your turn, but it actually happened during your opponent's turn. And so sort of things like that can be like harder to keep up with. I've seen this be a bit of an issue for people at locals just with keeping up with it all. So yeah, there's also that. Yeah, let me know down in the comments how you guys feel about the whole concept of the turn zero. If it's a good thing, if it's a bad thing. I'm going on the record and saying I don't really like it. And that's not me defending, Omni negates or something, because they could be even worse. But, I don't know. I don't think that that's very good. It doesn't feel very fun, at least not to me. But you can let me know down in the comments how you feel about it. All right, that's going to be it. Make sure that you subscribe to APS Plus. I'm going to try to challenge myself to upload a video every single day in December and sort of send the year out strong with like a video all the time. So subscribe and hopefully that'll pay off. It won't always be me talking. It might be, someone showing the decks they're playing. I want to try to get people involved more. It could be product openings, whatever. Okay, that's going to be it. I'll see you in the next one. Fast turn.